Every culture has its own unique origin myth. People need a sense of identity, a sense of who they really are and where they came from. The Irish and the Scottish are no different, but their origin myth is perhaps one of the most interesting. Maybe this origin myth is true. Today we are talking about the story of Scotia, the daughter of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh who traveled to the British Isles and laid the foundation for a new Gaelic culture.
51 million people entering another.
Surveillance camera capturing the
unidentified flying object.
Lockdowns and mass testing.
Today, that the world is going to end.
The myth of Scotia. The myth of Scotia was first recorded in the early 1300s, but it could be based on a much more ancient story. This tale speaks of an ancient Egyptian princess who was expelled from her homeland along with her husband, a Greek king named Gaelic. Faced with few options, this royal family and their attendants sailed west, through the Pillars of Hercules and then to Spain. After stopping briefly in Iberia, they ventured further west, eventually settling in Ireland and Scotland. After battling with the local people, Scotia and Gaelic established two kingdoms. Scotland was named for Scotia, while Iberia, the ancient name for Ireland, was named for her son, Hyber. Finally, the Gaelic people were named after the Greek king Gaethelos. Another variant of the story states that Gaethelos was actually the son of Scotia. Regardless of the details, many Scottish and Irish people today resonate with the story and believe that they are descended from some of the most ancient cultures on the planet. Unfortunately, mainstream historians aren't so optimistic, and they dismiss the story as a work of fiction designed to legitimize the Scottish race. As Steve Boardman of Edinburgh University puts it, it was a way of asserting the natural existence of the kingdom of the Scots. The real story of Scotia. Despite dismissals from mainstream historians, many paranormal researchers are convinced that there is some truth to the story. A recent book called Scotia, Egyptian Queen of Scots by Ralph Ellis points to key evidence in ancient Egyptian history. Specifically, Ellis points out the myth of Scotia can be traced all the way back to a text written by the ancient historian Manetho in 300 BC. Based on Ellis's interpretation of Manetho's writings, Scotia was actually Ankhesen Amun, the daughter of Nefertiti and the wife of King Tut. Manetho also states that after King Tut's death, Scotia remarried another pharaoh named A. It was at this point that the entire royal family was forced to flee Egypt due to some kind of civil war, taking them with thousands of followers and plenty of supplies. Were ancient Egyptians in Britain? As it turns out, there's plenty of evidence that points to a considerable ancient Egyptian presence in Britain. In 1939, 2 Egyptian ships were found buried in Ferriby, and were later carbon dated to around 1400 BC. Could these have been the same ships used by Scotia and her followers? Other researchers have pointed out the Neolithic skeletons in Britain seem to have elongated skulls, a feature seen throughout royal families of ancient Egypt. And one of the best-known examples of this feature is King Tut. In addition, numerous ancient necklaces have been found in Britain that are identical to those found in Egypt. These necklaces are often in the style of gold torques, featuring beads and other detailed jewelry only found in Egypt. Often found in burial sites throughout Britain, these items are accompanied by shoulder ornaments, hieroglyphics, and even mummified apes. It goes without saying that apes are not native to British Isles, and they must have been imported by a culture much further east. Mummified humans have also been discovered, and mummification was one of the hallmarks of ancient Egyptian culture. Thousands of years ago, British people were worshipping the ancient Egyptian goddess Isis in temples throughout the Isles, and evidence of the Isis cult has been found in London. In addition, people were worshipping the Egyptian god Anubis during this early period. While many scholars believe that these religions were brought to Britain by the Romans, they could have arrived much earlier. There is also certain linguistic evidence that supports this theory. For example, there are many idioms and sayings in Welsh and Irish cultures that seem to have come from Egyptian and Berber languages. A historian named Malcolm Hutton also points out that many of those stone monuments and circles constructed by the ancient Britons seem to share certain similarities with ancient Egyptian monuments. For example, many stone circles align with Orion's belt and Sirius, just like the Great Pyramids of Giza. DNA evidence of ancient Egyptians in Ireland. DNA evidence could also back up the myth of Scotia. In 2015, researchers at Trinity College and Queen's University managed to sequence the genomes of ancient Irish people. Their findings were shocking. There was clear evidence of mass migration from the Middle East to Ireland in the distant past. One female farmer living in Belfast 5,200 years ago apparently had mostly Middle Eastern DNA with black hair and dark eyes. But if this is true, then why don't Irish people today look more like stereotypical ancient Egyptians? Well, what did ancient Egyptians actually look like? That question might not be so easy to answer. When most of us visualize an ancient Egyptian person, we often conjure up images of Cleopatra, black-haired, dark-eyed, and with a decidedly Mediterranean appearance. However, new evidence shows us that many of the Egyptian pharaohs probably had red hair. Gingers. Can you believe? Analysis of Ramses II shows that his hair roots had natural red pigments, implying that he had white skin and red hair. Seti I also had red hair, as well as Siptah and many other pharaohs. Some ancient Egyptian nobles also had blonde hair. In fact, we know that the Hittite prince Zanzanza had blonde hair, and he was once sent to marry Ankhesenamun, the same princess who could have been Scotia. So what does this mean? Well, look around Ireland and Scotland today and you'll see plenty of people with red hair and blonde hair. These traits could have been inherited from Scotia and her followers. Interestingly enough, red-haired mummies have been found in other locations as well, far from the borders of ancient Egypt. Some of the most puzzling examples have been found in China. Not only are these mummies red-haired, but they also seem to belong to a Celtic culture. One Chinese mummy was found wearing tartan leggings, and DNA analysis shows that these 6-foot skeletons have much in common with Western Europeans. It seems as though mummification was once linked quite heavily with the Celtic people, and that ancient Egyptian culture was spreading across the entire world at one point, from China to Ireland. Last, but certainly not least, we have to consider the fact that according to new genetic studies, up to 70% of all British men are related to King Tut. In contrast, only 50% of men from the rest of Europe are related to this pharaoh. This suggests that British people are actually more Egyptian than any other population in Europe. Scotia's grave. So what happened to Scotia after she arrived in Britain? One version of the legend states that she was killed during a battle with the tribe of Danu. Scotia's grave is allegedly located in Kerry, Ireland, and it attracts many visitors each year. Marked by a massive stone inscription, the grave has a mythical reputation, although there is no way of knowing whether the mythical Egyptian princess is actually buried here. While we'll never know for sure whether this myth is true, the wealth of evidence presents an obvious conclusion. If you have British blood, you're probably descended from Egyptian royalty. And there, ladies and gentlemen, is one more reason why gingers are special. Thanks for tuning in. Let us know if you're Egyptian, or if you're a ginger.